So, and how to install PyCharm? Basically the same way we did for Visual Studio Code. If you go here, you can see that it's available at Snap servers. So if you look for Snap, find PyCharm or something like that, you actually find PyCharm available, and actually the three options for installation, which are the PyCharm educational for educational license, but you don't need to use that, or PyCharm professional in case you wanna pay for a subscription of PyCharm IDE, or the one that I advise you and that I use, which is simply the PyCharm Community Edition, the one you can use for free and that you can use for whatever Python development you wish to create without having to pay anything for JetBrains. So some of JetBrains integrated development environments, they do have this community open source edition. So instead of paying for using the IDE, you can simply use it as free, as an open source IDE. And that's basically what I do, for example, both for PyCharm in case of Python as for IntelliJ in case of Java. So you don't have to pay, you just have to use the community edition. So this is the edition or the version that we are going to install by simply calling snap install PyCharm community, the same way that we did for Visual Studio Code. And it has the same advice that we gotta ignore and use the classic attribute here. This advice basically tells that this revision of Snap PyCharm community was published using classic confinement and thus may perform arbitrary system changes outside of security sandbox that snaps are usually confined to, which may put your system at risk. But you don't have to worry with that, and you can simply use the classic attribute here for installing it as we did for Visual Studio Code. So snap install PyCharm community -- classic, and then it will download from Snap servers, and I'll fast forward for you not have to waste your time here again. So it will download the latest stable version from the Snap server. Okay, now we finished installing PyCharm Community Edition IDE, and how do we check that? The same way that we did for Visual Studio Code, by calling snap list and checking if PyCharm Community Edition is listed. As we know that every listed application here is by default the ones already installed through Snap. And here is the PyCharm Community Edition 2024.2, which is the latest stable version JetBrains edition available at the Snap server. And the other way that we can check is by calling the symbolic link PyCharm community and -- version, and if it's installed right, it will show the version which is the Community Edition 2024.2. Okay, and how do we call it? We can simply call the PyCharm community symbolic link, or we can go here to show applications and look for PyCharm community, and in this case we should add this to favorites desktop bar. I don't know why Visual Studio Code has been added automatically, but in this case for PyCharm we can add it manually very easily, just clicking the right button on the application at the show applications and choosing to add to favorites. Okay, so now we have the application icon here. I'll put it here on the right side of IntelliJ, as both are from JetBrains. Actually, I'll bring Visual Studio Code here for besides PyCharm. For example, now I have Eclipse in IntelliJ for Java, and I have PyCharm in Visual Studio Code for Python, and Visual Studio Code also for JavaScript, and Vue.js and Electron.js, and some other languages as well. So we can either call the symbolic link here at the terminal, PyCharm community, or we can simply click here now on the symbolic link icon at the favorites desktop bar. And if you want to see here at the file system where Snap has installed our PyCharm installation, it must have installed it at the same place as it has installed Visual Studio Code, which is the root folder /snap/ the folder for the application, which in this case is PyCharm community. So here it is the installation folder for the PyCharm IDE application we've just installed, with the application and all dependencies needed for it to run. In the same way as with Visual Studio Code, here at the root/snap/bin, it has also created automatically this PyCharm community symbolic link. And remember that this /snap/bin folder is already added to our path environment variable, so that we can simply call PyCharm community and open our application, or rather click here at the PyCharm Community Edition symbolic link icon and do the same. And another thing that I'd like to show you is here at the Ubuntu Software Store. You can also see these two IDEs we just installed by simply looking for it. For example, the code, Visual Studio Code application, you can look for it and you find it here saying that it is already installed as we know it. If you wanted to delete it or remove it, you could remove it either using the terminal or clicking here at this garbage icon here, and it would uninstall, also using the Snap installation manager. So here it tells which source has been that for the installation of the application, and we know that for Visual Studio Code as for PyCharm we have installed them from Snap server, so that's why it's showing here the Snap server. And the same way for PyCharm, if we looked for it, here is the PyCharm community IDE application already installed. We can click on it. Also, if you want to remove it, you just have to click here at the garbage link, and also it tells the source of the installation, which is the Snap store or Snap server. So for installing through Snap installation manager, it's pretty much straightforward, both for installing as for searching for it, or even for uninstalling it later if you want. It's much simpler than installing additional servers at your Linux installation servers and installing through apt. So every time you can install an application, use Snap, you should prefer it than by installing through apt. But in case the application does not exist at Snap, which is not our case here for Visual Studio Code and PyCharm. In cases the application does not exist at Snap servers, then you would have to install either using Snap default servers or adding additional servers for your Linux installation, and then using apt the same way for installing them. So let's click at the icon here at the desktop bar, and it will open PyCharm integrated development environment so that we can do some basic configurations and create our project Hello World Python the same way we did at Visual Studio Code. So here at JetBrains interface, I like its general interface more than I like other IDEs interfaces. And for all JetBrains IDEs, the interface is kind of the same. For example, for IntelliJ and for PyCharm, and for the many other IDEs we have at JetBrains, the base interface is actually the same. And one of the things that I like to do is to customize here at the VM options the actual memory allocation that the application can use. So it's already configured here for the value that I used to set, which is 8 gigabytes. So this is the maximum memory of my system that the PyCharm application will be able to use. For example, I used to set half of the total memory of the system. So in my system I have 16 gigabytes available in general for my RAM memory. So for JetBrains IDEs, including PyCharm, I used to set half of the total memory of my system so that it can use according to its needs. So that's the only configuration I used to make. And another configuration you can do is customize the theme. I like the dark theme. You can also set here the font size. You can see all settings here, all settings. And one of the most important configurations is the Python interpreter path. So here you can choose which Python interpreter you want to use by default, either the Python 3.13 or the Python 3.10, or for example we can choose Python 3.12 as we also have it installed, but in this case it's taking those two symbolic links, Python and Python 3, and it knows that for Python we have it set to Python 3.10, and for Python 3 we have it set for Python 3.13. If we would like to use Python 3.12, either we would reset the alternative Python to Python 3.12 instead of 3.13, or we could choose directly here the folder for Python 3.12 if we want it, but I'll not change that. I'll leave it as default the 3.13, and you have other configurations here for keymap, for the editor, the plugins you can also add here, as we also can with Visual Studio Code. So if we wanted to install Docker plugin or extension, we would just click here, install, and it would install Docker to PyCharm. Python Community Edition, it's already installed here by default. We don't have to install any Python plugin in the case of PyCharm. And we have a lot of other plugins that we can later install. We have version control, for example, when we want to configure GitHub and Git, build execution deployment, languages and frameworks, if we want to configure Django or any other language, for example TypeScript, JavaScript here. Some tools available, for example Python integrated tools or Python external documents. External labs as matplotlib, Flask, pandas, and so on. Some advanced settings, but actually you won't have to change anything here for the basic use of this IDE. So after customizing, you can go here at projects and create here new project, or get a new project from GitHub, or actually open an existing project, but I want to create a new one. So create new project, pure Python. The name of the project will be test. Here it's not the name of the file, it's the name of the project itself, or the folder where the Python files will be saved into. So it's not test.py, it's simply test. And here it's the location, and we gotta first create our workspace the same way we did for Visual Studio Code. So now we want to create a workspace for PyCharm. So here at the home folder you can create a new folder called PyCharm -workspace, and then select that from here, the location of your project. It will now be home PyCharm workspace. So here is the project folder inside the workspace where all the files of this project will be saved into. Here it's the interpreter type. We can use the project virtual environment type, the base conda type if we had Anaconda installed, or a custom environment. And here set the actual version of the interpreter, either Python 3.10, 3.13 or 3.12. It's automatically detected, including the Python and Python 3 symbolic links and alternatives that we've set at our Python installation, but I'll simply leave it as Python 3.13. And PyCharm will always create a virtual environment inside the project, inside the workspace. So here we have the workspace at home /Daniel/PyCharm-workspace/ the project folder, which is test, and /venv, and this venv folder here will be the virtual environment that PyCharm will always use when creating any project. So this is all we gotta set, and you can maximize here in order to see the create button here down below, and simply now click on it for creating our project. Okay, maximize here. It also offers here some plugin updates. You can close here the welcome window, and here you have the project folder, test folder at your home directory /PyCharm workspace/test. Inside it you have the venv folder for the virtual environment configurations. Remember that differently from Visual Studio Code, PyCharm always will create virtual environments for each of your projects, and we'll talk more about it when we see Anaconda, because with Anaconda we are the ones to be creating those virtual environments manually, or at least setting what virtual environments we exactly want Anaconda to create. But here at PyCharm it will always create by default virtual environments, which are basically some configurations regarding the versions of Python and all Python dependencies we are gonna use. So this is the venv folder, and here inside the test folder, the root folder, we can create now a new file, or directly here a Python file that I'm gonna call again as test, and it will add the extension Python or Py. So test.py, and here we simply will use the function print along with the argument. Observe all the auto-completion and documentation automations that appear. So the argument will be hello world Python. How to increase the font size here? Can go here to view, increase font size in all editors. Okay, I guess now it's pretty good for you to see. In case you wanna set the default for when creating other new projects, having already that default font size set, you can go here, File, Settings, and then you go to all those settings of the PyCharm application as a whole, and you can go here, Editor, Font, and set the font here you want by default the application to use, so that on the next project we create, it will use by default this 26 font size by default, without us having to increase every time that font here at the view. Another way you can select or check which version of the Python language or which version of the interpreter you're using is checking here down below. It actually shows for this project which current interpreter it's using. So you can click here and very easily change which interpreter you're using. For example, if we wanted to change for Python 3.10, we would simply click here, or we could go to the interpreter settings again, or add here a new interpreter and whatever. But I'll simply let the Python 3.13 that's already set. Here you can set the number of spaces at the indentation, which is by default set for 4 spaces. It could also be set for tabs. It's better to leave it set as spaces. So by default, the indentation in Python, which is very important as we're gonna see, is set to 4 spaces. So you don't have to change anything here. And the line separator as \n, both for Python as for other languages. So now for running our Python program, you simply have to save it, or not even this, because the saving is automatic at JetBrains IDEs, including at PyCharm. So this file is already saved as soon as we stop writing. So for running it, we simply have to click here, run test.py, or click here at the run menu option, run test.py. If we wanted to debug it, we should click here, debug test.py, and if we wanted to run with other configurations, we would click on that other option. So, but we simply want to run it, so we can click here, run test.py, or press Shift Enter, and it will run inside this internal terminal here inside PyCharm. So we succeeded in installing both Visual Studio Code as PyCharm using eSnap Application Installation Manager, and also writing the same application, Hello World application, both at Visual Studio Code as at PyCharm.